we pulled teams together to create a regional team, and so that was what was going to be done in this particular instance. We were pulling Dallas, Houston, and New Orleans together to form this regional response in order to execute the warrants.
We went up to Killeen, Texas, to Fort Hood, and we practiced for 2 days loading in and out of cattle trailers. This was a lot of preparation. People were worried about women and children. We practiced over and over again.
Had areas that were laid out there at Fort Hood where you trained. Since we had the rear of the complex, we had some, it was a tape model that was laid out on the ground so that you knew kind of what you were going to be looking at, because I guess we had some good aerial surveillance that had given a good layout of the place.
It was a bigger mission than ever had been done before by any of us, but because there were so many agents involved in it and it was such a large target.
The night before, we were all kind of just a little antsy, because it was big. At that time, we were starting to realize that, hey, this is probably the biggest enforcement operation in modern law enforcement history. No anxiety, nothing like that. It was going to be another day at work. So with the 2 trailers that were coming up, you had New Orleans and Houston were going, I believe, up to the ammo room, because the idea was to get there to the gun room where everything was stored so that we could, cut off the ability of the people to get there and to get to the guns and everything. And then you had Dallas that was in the front trailer that came a little bit further around the front of the building.
We had a news guy who followed us into the compound. Well, we didn't know who he was. And
we were trying, what's going on? And they said there was a vehicle stopped on the side of the road. And come to find out, didn't know this at that time, but after the fact, found out that vehicle stopped on the side of the road was actually one of the Davidians.
So then he's out there looking for this big story that's going to make his career and everything, and he's not real sure where the Branch Davidian complex is.
If my memory serves me correctly, he was the mailman that lived in the compound, but also worked at the post office. He delivered mail.
But he stops the mailman. Well, the mailman happened to be a Branch Davidian, and so people don't realize how one little ripple goes forward.
And he was stopped on the side of the road talking to someone. And again, after the fact, found out that person he was talking to was actually the reporter who was looking for directions to get to the compound.
So that's how we got tipped off.
On the way up there, the helicopter started coming over the rear of us, which was to provide the diversion, the distraction, to pull their attention to the rear of the compound in the event that something, that they did, think anything was going on.
That's the other thing in the preparation. We had done so much preparation, we realized at one point that the medic standing next to me had 2 medical bags. Well, there's no way he didn't have a gun hand then. So I had a medical bag in one hand so that he could have a gun hand and I could have a gun hand. So we're like some of the last 2 off that trailer. By the time I hit the end of the trailer, there's already gunfire. And then I'm like, that doesn't sound right. That sounds like automatic gunfire. And then I'm looking and I'm seeing the guys in front taking cover behind some cars. You gotta remember, there wasn't much cover out there to take. So, and then I see the group that I'm supposed to be with is, instead of heading for the front, they veered off, and there's this scraggly tree and this old, kind of like a white bread truck, broken down looking thing. Here, it wasn't really a van, it was more like a bread truck that's here, and they're going that way, and I realized they're shooting at us.
And as the helicopter started coming up, the gunfire started to erupt. And we could hear the gunfire coming from the front, and then we started to actually encounter gunfire coming towards us.
The question of the hour, who shot first? I think that number 1, there's no question, they shot first. Stop and think about ATF's training. We train Do I have a clean shot? Are there citizens in the way? Is there, I mean, there's such a pause before any officer takes a shot that it's amazing more officers don't get killed on the job. It became evident pretty quickly they didn't want us to leave. I mean, they shot out tires on the trailers and stuff, and underneath the bread truck there was rocks and gravel coming up.
I remember running through those trees and Jack Grabowski saying, "Are they shooting at us?" You know, and I'm thinking in my mind, well, those aren't bees going 100 miles an hour past our ears. Those are bullets, you know, keep your head down. And I never forget, you know, it's just as clear as day, there was a little wagon that was sitting right outside the building. And as we started making our way up there, we could tell somebody was getting a bead on us. And right about that time, the wagon that was there, all of a sudden it just, I mean, literally, something hit it and it just, all of a sudden it wasn't there anymore. and I'm not sure whether that was a 50, but somebody had something pretty heavy.
I believe after 2, 3, I don't know how many unsuccessful ceasefires, then we had one that held and we proceeded to walk out. But the problem at that point is, since you've had these ones that have already not held, you're pretty sure somebody's fixing to shoot you in the back. So I can remember I had been wounded and I had my gun in my left hand, and I can remember one of the girls stayed with me, one of the other agents, and we walked in a serpentine pattern to get out to the road, hoping that that way we'd be less of a target or whatever, because there's nothing out there. I mean, there was very little cover to be taken.
Probably one of the eeriest things to hear on the radio was probably Kenny King after he had been shot on the roof and rolled over into the courtyard and was down. And he was, and you could just hear him, you know, he was talking about, hey, you know, guys, come get me, I'm hit. And
then it was also very hard because you're hearing on the radio that, you know, different agents have been shot. One's asking for help, one's saying that they're bleeding. And his voice, you could tell he was getting weaker and weaker, and he'd come back on, a lot of radio discipline, you know, and he was on there, he'd come back on and say, hey, look, I'm starting to feel, you know, I'm feeling like I'm blacking out, you know, come get me, guys. We're waiting there, and finally we get, you know, we get told, hey, there's some people that are, we got a team, they're trekking their way in there to help get you guys out. And all of a sudden, we start taking fire from down the ravine. I mean, you know, just the bullets just cracking off, you know. And now we're on the side of this hill out in the open, more or less, because it's hard to hide behind a little trunk of a mesquite tree. So we all hit the dirt. Now, talk about those things after the fact. You know, we have on blue, okay, those are our BTUs at that time. Our uniforms were blue. And that, on the side of a grayed out hill, you know, browned out hill in Texas in the wintertime where you know, nothing looks like you but you with blue on. So a couple minutes go by. It seemed like a couple minutes. It might have been faster than that. But the shooting stops. And then all of a sudden, this guy starts coming out of the ravine waving. He's waving his hand at us, you know, like the white flag sign, you know. And so at that time, you know, we, you know, kind of hone in on him, you know, and get him to come on up the hill. He comes on up the hill. We get him close enough to us. We back and turn him backward and make him back up to us. We get somebody out there to him, and we are able to arrest him. He has a gun on him. We end up taking the gun off of him, and we ask him, is there anybody else down there? And he says, you know, I guess there were 3 of them. He says, you know, one's dead, and the other guy ran off. All of a sudden, we come to that stream on another end of the property, and we got to cross it, and it's a good little open area. So if there's somebody, you know, they got a good shot at you when you're going across. So we decide, okay, we're gonna do this. We're not gonna give them a whole big target to shoot at. We're gonna, you got a jackrabbit across this thing, and you know, and keep your body going. All of a sudden, Roger Guthrie, who was the sniper, is looking down the ravine, and he's got his scope out, and he says, stop, everybody down. We hit the ground, and he sees the back of this guy. You want to talk about discipline and doing the job right. I remember Guthrie saying, I've got him, I can take the shot.
and he's talking to Daryl Dyer. Dyer was an ASAC at the time, and he would have been the highest ranking guy out there with us at that time. And he says, I can take him, I can take him. He says, what do you see? He says, all I can see is his back, but I can take him. And Daryl says to him, keep him in your scope. Don't shoot unless he becomes a threat. I think once we all got out and we found out, we started learning, we learned that there were, the total number of people who had actually been killed. We learned that at that time. We also learned about the number of injured and some of the people who were injured. And we also learned about some of the things that were happening. Like, we had no clue, but we kept hearing these big bangs, and we knew that, they had a 50 cal, but these were like bigger bangs. And we found out they were throwing frag grenades. They're not just breaking the law, they're waging full-out war on you.
We were fulfilling a prophecy. He had made these predictions to these people that all of this was going to happen. Then he needed us to show up and do what we did. And so I think the biggest fault is that I don't think we looked at criminals as criminals. We didn't look at them as people look at terrorists today. It's a totally different mindset. If you look at a suicide bomber or a kamikaze pilot that was willing to give their life for what they were doing, that was what a Branch Davidian was.
We came to work to serve a warrant and ended up in a war zone. After the initial warrant service, we actually had to wait for reinforcements to come. So we literally, after we got back to the command post that evening, we got redeployed, so to speak, to different locations, right? So we had to set up a perimeter. So we covered the main roads that were leading in, and along with the help of DPS and the Texas troopers, we set up, as much of a perimeter to keep people from coming in through conventional means anyway. We went back out there as a team because we said we're going to stick together. So we got out there and we're on the side of this road and it is cold. And we had on, our, jackets and everything, but it was cold out there. And it was probably about, it might have been getting close to a little after midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. And these headlights start approaching us. And we're going, okay, and I know, I think Jack had a shotgun, Mark had an MP, and I think I had my, I had my 9, or I might have had an MP too, but I just remember us going, okay, if this guy gets any closer, you know what, hey, just be ready. And so the vehicle kept getting closer and closer and closer, and eventually, we started honking his horn and going, hey guys, hey, and we're going, what the heck, He pulls on up, and of all people, it's Ronnie Carter from the Charlotte Field Division. Ronnie Carter led the Charlotte SRT, and they started driving earlier that day when they heard what was going on. And he pulled his team together, and they drove. And I just remember when he got there, he said, haven't replayed this one. He said, you guys got what you need? I said, yeah, we're okay. He says, where's your helmet? Lost it. Reached back in his car. Take this. You guys hungry? Reach in his car. Take this. He said, I'm gonna be right back. I'm going to get some people. Y'all need to get out of here. You don't need to be out here after that. That guy showed me what ATF was all about. I don't care where you're from. I don't care where you were that day. When the call for help went out, those guys came. And they came in droves. There's no reason that any one of those stray bullets shouldn't have had my name or anybody else's name on it. But the people who ultimately paid a sacrifice, trying to protect their own, no greater love. You know, we came on this job because we had a service mentality, you know, to serve the public, to protect and defend those who could not protect themselves. And for those who've retired and gone on, you know, I mean, obviously we're grateful for their service and the time that they put in. For those who are deceased, you know, God bless them, we miss them. And for those who are still here with us, you know, this is 25th, I don't know where some of us may be, you know, 5 years, 10 years, 25 years from now. But if we have an opportunity to recognize this occasion again, I just pray to God I can be there and be a part of it, because that's a special group of people.